Globespan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that have taken a side, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globespan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation building. Globespan believes that every Guyanese voice is part of the nation building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana.
This land is our land now.
As the world turns on its axis, bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globespan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
We ain't giving up no river that belong to we. Not the one blue sake.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Guyanese brothers and sisters. Once again, we are here at Globespan. I'm Nohar Singh, your host for tonight's program. And we have tonight as our guest, we have Mr. Rajendra Bisesar, a BSc in Sociology. We also have no other than Professor Dr. Terence Blackman, heads up the Mathematics Division at Medgar Evers. He's been on our program several times and one of the major contributor, sort of becoming a cornerstone of Globespan. We also have Mr. Joe Prasad, the former advisor to President Dr. Jagan, and also by trade, he's an engineer. While I'm making these announcements, I would like to ask our viewers to please go ahead and share the program, share the link among your friends, family, and groups. And also, I would like to say that if you have not subscribed, press the subscribe button on YouTube so that every time Globespan 24/7 goes live, you'll be able to get a notification. So do all of that while I'm making this announcement that Globespan is a platform that it's in its 6th year, offering a community service for all voices. The platform invites all political parties, civil and religious leaders to share their opinions and to address their concerns. You could contact Globespan 24/7 by calling 631-782-8694 or email Globespan support@globespan247.com. Tonight's topic is in 2 parts. We would like to do very overview and then a little comparison of all the political parties in regards to their manifesto on education. That would be the first part. And the second part would be on agriculture, 2 very important sectors in us growing our country and in contribution to the overall economy. So tonight's program, as we start off, before we go into our topic discussion, I will really like to see if we could get a little update from Mr. Joe Prasad. He's on the ground. I believe he's in Region 6, originally from Berbice. If he could just give us an update on how things are progressing, how are the rallies going, what are the sizes of the rallies, and any indication that he can see, given his long history in politics and his knowledge of the ground. Joe, do you want to give us a little update on how you see things unfolding in Region 6 and across the country,
Certainly. Last week, Sunday, there was a meeting in Skeldon by the Rice Marketing Board area, which used to be a long time ago, where most of the political parties keep their meeting. And Ashuddin had a meeting, and that meeting, I can't believe that so many people turned out. And these people turned out in such a great number that the people by the roadside couldn't even hear as much as that. And the meeting delayed for over 2 hours because at Adventure, they stopped Ashuddin. So he was very late, and I thought many people will be leaving, but the people hang on there. And when I see that, I asked a few people questions in between, what bring you here today? They said cost of living is very high, corruption, etc., etc., etc. And as I go around, that's what the thing is. So when governments say they do all these things, we're talking about education here, right? And manifestos and policies and all these things. It is very strange. Then another PPP meeting was kept at 72 Village. And I went there. I think they brought a truckload of people there, and they must have got about 50, 60 people in 2, 3, 4, 5 villages, which is not very impressive. And I'm wondering if lots of people would not be going to vote. And the people I see turned out to the meeting, if they're going to go and vote Ashford. So these are all kind of challenges that is happening there. So
Thank you, Joe.
good.
Thank you. Professor Blackman, I know you have a line in to many parts of Guyana. I'm sure you have boots on the ground there as
Mr.
well.
Nuhar, may I ask something, please? I know you all can share. Would you want to permit us to share also, to bring other people on the program?
Naturally. That's a
Because
given.
at the moment, you're the only one with permission to share unless you allow us to share.
That is
I
not
don't know if that's
correct.
possible.
That is not
Okay,
correct,
fine.
Ginger. But go ahead and please, naturally, go ahead and
It
share.
says, I clicked it, it said only host can share in this meeting.
No, not at all.
Okay.
That's your link to get into the meeting, but the actual link to share the program, I'll forward
Okay.
that to you, Virginia, so you could have that.
Okay.
Yes. Professor, please, I know you have boots on the ground. Give us your take on what's happening.
Well, it's very similar to what Joe's described. I think what we're seeing is increasingly the wind's resonance. I think folks are conservatively estimating that wind can perhaps see 12 seats in the. So it looks increasingly as if we're going to see 3 blocks of seats in parties with significant seats in the upcoming parliament. My fingers are crossed, and I'm waiting to see what emerges. But it is clear that the APNU continues to hold on to a sizable chunk of their base. It's also clear that certainly the PPP is the ruling party, and so one expects. And there is still strong sentiment that says that they will do well. But there is also increasingly and undeniably win is catching up.
And Professor, just to continue that conversation for a minute or two, what I've noticed is most of the political parties now are targeting, pointing their guns, their heavy guns to win. Is that an indication in itself
I think that is an indication that folks have been sharpening the mere fact that folks have been sharpening their attacks. Certainly, we saw recently some of the APNU meetings where there were much sharper attacks against Win. I think we saw that with the PPP perhaps earlier. So it is clear that Mr. Azruddin Mohammed and the Win Party are having a sizable effect on the elections, and there are many people who conservatively estimate that they could see as many as 12 to 15 seats.
It's quite substantial for a party that's
Yeah,
just really
that
launched a few
is
months
a
ago.
few months old. I mean,
Yeah.
we've talked about this before, and I've held off on giving too much credence to the numbers, but I think that there are many people who are suggesting that this is more than just people coming to the party, to wear the blue T-shirt, but this is a substantive groundswell around the way in which the society is being governed, and folks are legitimately looking for something that is not APNU or PPP.
Yeah, indications are that. Mr. Vajendra Bisesar, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so Rajendra, you also on the ground, you've been around in the political realm for many years, well experienced. You have your ears to the ground. Do you agree to these comments? And also, Rajendra, if you want to take a minute or so to kind
Yeah,
of
well,
Put the video.
you know,
there's no doubt in my mind that Wayne is gathering an increasing popularity, but it's up in the air. What I do know is that given our constitution, I'm just saying theoretically, if the PPP were to lose 10 seats and they get 23 seats, and Wayne could take a number of seats, one party with 24 seats, one party with 23 seats, the one with 24 seat will take the presidency. So if by perchance Win were to get 24 seats and PPP were to lose 10, then you could very well see, this is theoretical stuff, hypothetical, Win being Nazarene being the president of Guyana. Now, it matters how they carry the campaign, how they explain to the people the nature of the situation. And if the people really want to change, they'll have to sell that to the people. I was talking to a number of small parties, and I indicated to them, if some of the small parties were to, let's say, put Guyana first, or if they really wanted a change, were to remove themselves from contesting or suggest to their people to switch votes to a particular party that had the better chance of winning. I recall the Biden situation and Bernie Sanders, where those people switched their delegates to Bernie and Bernie won the, the presidential candidate status. So anything can happen between now and then. But definitely one can see a level of popularity of the win candidate. And I think the PPP themselves are seeing it, because I heard them talking about don't let it become a minority. And to my mind, the PPP need to be advised. What they're doing is helping win. They should just relax and sell what they're going to be doing and so on,
yeah,
instead of trying to put obstacles in the way of other parties. It's doing
yeah,
them harm.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Rajendra. Thank you. Gentlemen, I'm anxious to get into the segment of education, but I just want to spend 2, 3 more minutes on the same opening topic, discussing the status of the political parties. Joe, do you think we have the maturity within our political realm that whereby, referring to what Rajendra just mentioned, that the smaller parties who may not be able to win a seat or so would give an indication towards moving their votes indirectly to another party in the interest of the country, as Rajendra described it?
I think that's a very good idea, but it might be too late now. Because when you look at the numbers, the only parties you're hearing about WIN, PPP, PNC, not even that much of AFC. But if, let's say, AFC will get a seat or two, they should also be, that would be wise to join, but I don't see the other parties would get anything much, you know?
Yeah. Professor, you think we have that political maturity to what
Well,
Ginger described?
I think if we go back to the time when we had a minority government, we saw what happened. Ultimately, there was a no confidence motion. So I I I'm not as optimistic that there will be able to effectively govern the country, but it appears that that's the direction we're going. And then I think it would depend in large part on which party, as Rajendra Basasar just noted, which party secures the plurality. So who gets 26, who gets 24, and who gets 12. And I think that's that's the issue here. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's clear that I think it's clear that the PPP is not going to get uh, north of 33 seats, and so and it's looking increasingly likely that it will be less than 33, and so we will have that. So the question is, how does that split itself up, and it really does depend on which party sort of emerges with the plurality.
Okay. So I want to start the first segment of tonight's program on education, a key component for the nation's growth. Devin, do you mind to bring up that CSEC pass rate from 2021 to 2025? Professor, if it's okay with you and Rajendra, and of course, Dr. Prasad, I want to start with the CSEC pass rate 2021, 2025. If we look at the graph right there, we are looking from 2021, it went up to 68%, and it dropped drastically down to 65 in 23, 67% pass rate by 24, and we slightly down again in 2025 from to 66%. Now that's the CSEC. It's an indication of what our children be, the level they'll be at heading into tertiary education at, within years to come. So Rajendra, can you
Yes,
start, maybe give
I,
some
I don't mind.
thoughts to this?
Well, first of all, I would like to differentiate between the passing of the exams, the certificated and the educated. We have a lot of complaints about people with 21, grade 1, but on the job and in terms of interpretation, we are poor at it. So critical thinking seems to be absent even among those with a lot of grade 1s. That's the first point I'd like to note. Secondly, the fact that some people glorify in the fact that we top the Caribbean and so on, that's good for the show. But then when you go down to the nitty-gritty at the bottom, the level of people that passes and what subjects, there's a lot of question marks.
Oh boy.
Did we lose Rajendra?
Yeah, I was worried that his it looked like he lost his video, and now it looks like we've lost his
Devin,
Mr. Bisas, Mr. Bisas, are you there?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to stop this thing. Let me hope somebody else will call me. Are you there?
Yes, we're hearing.
yes.
Okay, so that's the first point I like to make. The second point I like to make is that we keep hearing years and years ago that we are poor in maths and poor in English. And the president realized that also recently. But I'm not seeing in the manifestos of the two main parties addressing the issue of the poor performance in maths and English. I had written in the press about this, and I had suggested that in a class of where we have Form 1 and 2, doing 14 subjects is ridiculous, and a lot of those are database subjects you can get from Google. I suggested 9 subjects with an emphasis on maths and English. In maths and English, having an extra teacher in those 2 classes, because we have to do something about the low grades in maths and English. I suggested that. And the best teachers in Form 1, 2, and 3, because by the time you finish Form 3, you're supposed to self-study like we used to. You look at the example and you do the exercise and the teacher guides you. So children can move at their own pace with guidance from the teachers. Nobody seems to be touching this. And in fact, I think it was Wynne that had some suggestion with regard to examining the education system. So
Yeah.
I suggest we should have a commission itself to revamp it. We no longer need an education system where you're an empty vessel may fail you. We need to teach critical thinking. And I found when I was looking at the manifestos of the 3 parties, I found it was interesting that Wynne manifesto, while the rest talk of enhancing this and enhancing that and becoming this and becoming that, Wynne had a different twist. They didn't concentrate too much on infrastructure and the other thing. They were looking at the children from the birth to 18.
Yeah, Rajendra, if you don't mind, we will come to that aspect of comparing the different
Okay,
yeah, we will
fine, no
come to
problem.
that. But your points are very well taken. And Devin, if you don't mind, you could bring up that graph on CSEX and the mathematics pass rate, because that will dovetail right back into Rajendra's point regarding the maths. Professor, Rajendra mentioned a couple of main things there, and one of course is maths, which is your strong point. In your comment where we at educationally wise at this CSEC level, please also see if you could add how is it that we as a nation could overcome our political differences in the interest of educating our future generations.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm glad you because I would want to say that, if you look at this graph, I mean, you can see here 34%, 31%, 30. I mean, it's movement, but if one looks at it from far away, it means that we're stuck somewhere about a third of our people are passing the exam. We might go up a little, down a little, but our structure is kind of pulling us at a third. And I think that to the point that Rajendra just made, that's kind of where I wanted to start, which was the election is about the future our children will inherit, right? And the question is whether or not the oil well will fuel the kinds of classrooms that he just described, or will be stuck with the corruption. And I think I was very happy that you asked that we're having this topic, because I looked at the manifestos of all six of the major parties, and they've all made education reform central to their platforms. They all recognize it as a cornerstone for national development and so on. And in some ways, education, as has just been described, is really a battleground for voter trust. Huh? But I want to say, and this is the point I wanted to make. There are bold proposals on all of these, and we will talk some about their proposals. But what I think is there is no national consensus on a clear long-term strategy, right? And this is a critical shortfall given the scale of the transformation that's occurring in Guyana. So we need to begin to think about education as human capital development, education as driver social mobility, education as precondition for innovation, competitiveness. And this is where maths comes in. If you can't work quantitatively, I mean, this medium that we're in, Zoom, is something that is mediated, undergirded by quantitative thinking and serious quantitative thinking. And so if we don't make the sort of transformative investment in education, then I think we will find ourselves in trouble. And so, I've gone through, free tuition is not a strategy. Free laptops is not a vision, right? I think if you look at the PPP, you see continuity. We want to continue these investments in infrastructure, the cash grants, the smart classrooms. These are all important, but it's not yet systemic. If you look at APNU, you get a more redistributive kind of approach, right? Monthly stipends to tertiary students, teacher housing, but there's no curriculum reform. I think of these AFC, similar kind of thing for AFC, right? Short-term social protection, 75,000 per child, free uniforms, meals, transportations. But the long-term vision again is left defined. I think interestingly, and that's why I wanted to get all of them. Like I think FGM stands out in this. I mean, education, digital transition, global competitiveness, shared governance. So I think that they actually are approaching what might be necessary in their education manifesto, whether this is actually. And I think also when this youth and national identity from when and these public-private partnerships. I think they have something they call the Thrive Grant. But again, it sort of lacks the specificity around like the teacher development. What are the things that you're going to do? So I think, in this moment, no party to date has directly addressed, when you showed the graph about the CSEC pass rates, there are the inequities, if you can look across the sort of regional differences, hinterland versus coastline, etc. These CXC results look quite different. So I think, no party to date has really addressed the structural inequities that are sort of baked into our educational system. So I'm I'll stop there, but I can say much more.
Yeah, yeah, and Professor Rajendra and Joe, programs like these talking about the detailed part of education and these type of topics, they're not the most popular programs that you would have on the circuit, but they are necessary program because this is how our nation will grow. This is one of the most important aspect of the our nation's growth. So it's important that we have these discussions. Um, Definitely is, it's not going to be perfect in any way, but it's a necessary part of our growth. Joe, what's your take on the educational department? A few minutes. I know your expertise is agriculture, but go ahead.
Yes. Don't forget, I was the director of primary education improvement program in Guyana, 94 to 97, when Dr. Jagan borrowed me from the Canadian government. And we did the writing and printing of textbooks from grade 1 to 6, the curriculum, scope and sequence charts, teacher's manual, etc. A couple of countries in the Caribbean liked it and wanted it too. And I leave something like what both my partners here said today. We need an ex post evaluation, which I prepared document for that, but I never hear back about that again. So indeed, we need education to be studied, have a group together to assess and make recommendation based on things in the other parts of the world, so we can move on. If you look at those curves we see there, it shows that that's not in there. It may have been going up a little or level out, but not such extreme. I must commend the government that they have done well, but not well enough, right? That they need now, what that tells you, proper assessment, evaluation, and where we are going. Take as an example, I had upgraded the teachers training college. I create insert with distant teaching to share knowledge. We did the library, and I give 41 scholarship to Reading University, because you cannot have all these programs and you don't have people to administer and implement these programs and to train teachers and retrain teachers and upgrading. So both Dr. Terence and both Mr. Rajendra have been very correct in what their assessment and observation is. So we need to improve in that field, have a committee, right, to have consensus and assess the evaluation status and how to improve on whatever,
Yeah,
and how to do ex post evaluation.
yeah. And just to read a comment from Truth, it is important to inculcate a culture of reading into our children again. Kids these days do not like reading newspapers, books, and the like. How do we incentivize these practices? So I guess what Truth is saying, and that's the name that he has in his posting, basically how we go back to what has really shaped us, a lot of reading. Devin, do you want to bring up that spreadsheet on what we did on the educational side of it? Could you bring that up? Dr. Terence Campbell, while Devin is bringing that up, if you don't mind, we did a layout for the PPP, the Win Party and APNU. There's a mission on AFC and Forward Guyana. So maybe you could just fill us in there as we progress on this discussion. So I'll go to Rajendra. Rajendra, on the PPP side, we are seeing that the grants they're offering is 100,000 annually, transportation 100,000 annually, free textbooks up to 8 CSEC and CAPE. Goals, unlimited slot, teachers higher salaries, but there's no specifics on the teachers higher salaries. In the manifesto, they talk about opening up 100 more new schools, the STEM program, and all for youths.
I looked at the manifesto. I have an idea, a clear idea what you have in the manifesto, Mr. Noir. But what I'm saying is this: is quantitative change and qualitative. Quantitative and qualitative are two terms we have to look at. Okay. Now I wrote about this also. We are talking of giving children in school grants, but we are not examining the dropouts who are not in school. what is happening to them? You talk of not a child left behind. So when you're in school, you get these grants, but if you cannot afford to go to school, nothing is being done for you, okay? So we need to examine that aspect of it. Of course, it's commendable. We have oil money, and it's easy to distribute money. That's the easy part. It's like we could borrow money and build infrastructure and whatever. That's the easy part. But to restructure and to qualitatively improve this situation is another thing. That my first point is the children who cannot afford to go to school and who drop out for various reasons. And that is why I have this appreciation for the win thing. They didn't concentrate so much on infrastructure and so on. Those are normative things that all government will look into. And they talked about looking into the lateness, looking into absentees, having a list of all the children from to 18, and so you'll have a clear database on who is attending school and who are not attending school. So you have a database that will allow you to approach those people. They talked of having school counselors, which means the counselors will go to visit the parents of those not attending school and try to find out why they're not in school and do something about it. So that aspect of it I find commendable. They also spoke of teachers being trained in trauma and child psychology, because when you look at what's happening in the school today, when you look at our society where the social fabric has collapsed, where there's no respect for women, no respect for the elderly, no respect for drivers on the road, I think it has to start. We have to start somewhere. Our history has been traumatic for a lot of us, and we sort of are short-tempered as a consequence, as a society. So we got to start somewhere. I'm saying that we have to start in the school system, and that is where I find it commendable, some of these things being talked about by the WIN. They also talk of the language barrier for the indigenous people also. We need to do something about that. Maybe be able to translate some of these books into indigenous language, so that they will not be at a disadvantage. So I feel, and they talked of remedial project at night. Now in other countries, in the developed countries, people can advance themselves. You have extra training, and you can train for this, train for healthcare, or train for that. We need to introduce this type of training even at night, so people can upgrade themselves to fit themselves into various slots in society. One of the major problems we have is that we have not designed our education system to suit our economy or to anticipate what has become necessary. I wrote also that the fact that we have Gaisuko Training College pushing out some of the best technicians you can think about. We need a number of those in the various regions if we want to really get our people up to standard in terms of being able to fit into the jobs, the skilled jobs that are available. There's so many things that need to be done, but it needs to be there need to be some clear understanding of the needs.
But Ginger, those are some very, very valuable contributions there. Quite a few of them. Maybe over a period of time, you probably want to come back and Globespan and expand on them. But they're very sensible, they're very straightforward, and certainly they're keeping with times. But Ginger, I don't know if you would have the answer to this question. It's from Amir Mohammed, and he's asking, are the gold scholarships only for online classes? And I guess he meant any are given to actually attend in person.
I am not sure what his manifesto on education wasn't that expansive actually. He sort of concentrated on some qualitative changes as opposed to some quantifiable advances, and that's what I found that he did. And he did address the need to he did address some of these things, which is important.
Yeah, Amir Mohammed, I'm not
So
too clear on
one other thing, if you don't mind. He also mentioned the idea of training in civic leadership and entrepreneurship, because when you're in school, you should be taught how to attend interviews, how to approach the bank for a loan. A lot of people can't approach the bank. They're scared to approach the bank. So then you need to be taught how to represent yourself at interviews, how to approach practical things that we need to learn. For instance, some child died drowning, and if somebody knew CPR, that child or that person could have been saved. We need to reintroduce these things into the school system
Yeah.
so that we're equipped to take care of people and ourselves and whatever in like first aid and all of these things. It's purely
Yeah.
the presently purely academic.
Yeah, Virginia will circle back to you. You'll have an opportunity again to add to what you
Okay,
already
thank you.
contributed. Professor Blackman, Virginia mentioned some very valuable components of what we need in terms of developing our educational from a younger age rather than waiting until they get to tertiary level. Please go ahead, add to that, expand on it.
No, I think Rajendra is absolutely correct. I think the thing is, it's the slide that you showed, what you have is a pass rate of about 33% on average. And so if you have a pass rate of 33% on average, that means that you have a failure rate of 67% on average. That's 7 out of 10, let's say. Conservatively, 6 out of 10 of your folks are not getting through. So it's a crisis. And oil can't solve that education crisis if we don't understand it. I mean, the presence of oil doesn't solve the question, and that's sort of what Rajendra is pointing out. If you look at the data, so this means that more than 50% of our workforce will lack full secondary education, right? So we can't take advantage of the opportunities, as he pointed out about the disparities across the hinterland and the coast, the disparities between urban and rural, the disparities between people who get the public education, people who get the private education, the teacher, capacity, the outdated curriculum, the weak, so math, there's weak STEM pipelines, right? You can't do physics and chemistry and all of the engineering and all of the other things if your mathematics is completely weak. So so what it does is it puts us in a place where nationally we're going to underperform in a high-tech post-oil future. There's no question about that. And when you look, I'm being critical, but not, but gentle but firm. I think when we look at you showed the spreadsheet, the proposals are just kind of about how we redistribute the money, but they're not transformational in the way that Rajendra wants for education, right? So, and I don't mean to, I'm not picking on the particular, but if you say a laptop for every child, it's important, but it's not an innovation strategy, right? So there's none of these 6 platforms offer a credible plan to scale up the teacher training, a credible plan for modernizing the curriculum in the manner that Rajendra just suggested, which aligns the curriculum with the kinds of jobs that are currently available and none of them have the sort of research-driven educational reform that Joe just pointed to. So I think this is the point that we have to face. And we've said this on on this program many times. We have to face up to the challenges that we have, and we have to ask our people to write down the things that address the challenges. And it's in this sense, I want to go back to where we started. It's in this sense that I think that both APNU and the PPP have left an opening for win, because people feel rightly that they're not getting what they're supposed to get in, quote, the education sector. It's not just a sector. It's the backbone for all of the other sectors. And so if you don't get the education right, then you don't get the human capital development right. And so our people are left to flounder to fend for themselves in an environment that is increasingly competitive, and they simply don't have the skills for doing it. So I actually think that in this area, all of the parties make very clear why this.
Terence, if I may say this, I took my son out of the school system because you get a 5, 6, 7, 20 CXC and you can't even find a job. And I redirected him to to Gaisuko. He's now well versed in electricity, this, and he also is a computer science engineer. The reality is that not all children have the same aptitude. Therefore, sometimes, rather than forcing somebody through the academics to come out with 2 or 3 and 4 CXE subject, and they might be inclined towards the technical aspect, we need to assess children at some stage and stream them into an area they might be good at what. And so the child is not left behind because you force him through how you see the child should go. And I think it's a major problem we have. And the other thing is,
I don't think you're wrong. I mean, if you look at Switzerland or you look at Germany, everyone is not going through a 4-year college, and they're going into technical training, and that's exactly part of what is necessary. You have to build up the domestic infrastructure, not just the research infrastructure tied to UG, but precisely to this kind of not vocational but technical education that offered.
And I want to say this, Darren, a major problem, no matter what you have in your manifesto, is who you choose to administer it. And one of the major problems we have in Guyana is this tendency to pick people not in accordance to merit, but because of affiliation, which is sometimes you have to do that. But we need to select, and no matter who goes into the government, my advice is to select people according to merit who can, whether they're from the diaspora, from wherever, whichever party, the people with the competence, with the vision, who can take us forward in a particular direction. If you take on your friend or yes man or whatever, you're not going to advance your manifesto itself. You're not going to bring it to fruition.
Yeah.
Beautiful manifesto, but you need administration to bring it to fruition.
Okay,
That is my advice to all the political parties.
Yeah. Professor, do you want to close up on your contribution, or should I switch to Joe?
No. I to close, I mean, I think, look, all of these things have strengths but serious policy gaps. And what I would like to see is some clear, targeted investment in, digital equity, not just the hardware. Joe mentioned this. I think you need a kind of national teacher innovation academy. I think you need to engage people as you just in the diaspora who have some expertise in this. I think you need the curriculum reform. You have to prioritize STEM/STEAM. You have to prioritize critical thinking. You have to prioritize the entrepreneurship literacy that was just mentioned. This is the biggest strength of WIN. I think you have to begin with some hinterland focused education. And so I think WIN and FGM, I think, surprisingly hit on something that is good for the 21st century. Yeah. And then finally, I think what Joe said at the beginning is you have to have real monitoring and accountability, right? So you're publishing the education outcomes on some dashboard so it's integrated as part of what people know what's going on. It's not like you're waiting and saying, oh, I have my pass rate went up 10% or 12%, and it becomes you need a sustained thing over an extended period of time to move us in a place where Guyanese are globally competitive.
They can measure their progress. Yes, agree. But Ginger, Mr. J. Barrett posted that schools already do that. It's called TVET, which is the technical and vocational. They have the QVCs and practical instrumental centers. So they are, to some extent, some of that. But I guess we need a better coordination and messaging and measuring, as Professor Blackman just mentioned. Joe, any contribution there? I see you raising your hand.
Yes, very much so. I have listened to the scholarly men there, which is very wonderful. But we must understand psychology in growing up a child. Discipline. Psych means mind. Ology means scientific study. We got to understand how the mind works. And both parents, a child's future is set from 0 to approximately 8 years. That child would got a discipline how the parents train him. And that child after that would be able to know which direction. But today, the parents and the children are all on cell phones and this program on the TV. So do they have the time and they don't have the attitudes towards studying and focusing on books. But so now we need programs to have parents come in to be told what to be done for these children, to give them that cultivation of a discipline and an attitude to study. That is the basic failure today.
Family structure.
Can I make one point in relation to Joe's observation? There is a small group in Guyana. Well, they're not so small, but they're called STEM Guyana, and that was one of the innovations that they brought out. They established a parent academy because the observation was that many of the, that they needed to work with the parents, and so there are many people in Guyana who are recognizing some of the challenges. But what I'm saying is that we're still not thinking of it as, we're still not bringing the vision to it, right? We're still thinking of it as a kind of thing where, I'll give some money here for this, I'll do some money there for that, rather than, as we've been trying to say, you need a national consensus on what education should look like in Guyana. And every party, in some sense, can play with the edges, but the core business of education should be kind of broadly agreed upon, and we should be thinking about how we find ways to fund it and to really position Guyana. Look, our best resource, oil, is great, but at the end of the day, it's the children who are the most important resource of Guyana.
Yeah.
To the extent that they go to where they go, we will go. Trust me.
Yeah.
You just said it. Where the children go, that's where the society goes.
Yeah.
If I may know, I have stood down politically. I'm not taking any political sides, if you notice. But I must say, and I'm not on Wynn's side or anybody's side at this point in time. But I did notice in the Wynn education program, they spoke of parents as first teachers, and you have kits and workshops for parents also, which I feel is something innovative, and it is in line with what Joe was talking about just now.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Devin, could you bring back up that educational spreadsheet? Just going to go down to the bottom, guys, just to do some key takeaway. The PPP, strong emphasis on free universal education, financial support for families, large-scale school construction, and AI-enabled digital learning. Win emphasis early childhood inclusion and digital access, proposes a tiered Thrive grant, and I believe what they meant by saying that is the 50,000, 30,000, and 15,000 for school children, robust special needs support, tech skills, coding, AI, robotics from primary level, an APNU focus on standard accountability, teachers' welfare, future-ready education with significant UG investment and stipends for higher education and the TVT students, technical and vocational. So that's some of the takeaway. All the parties are offering incentives, different cash incentives, some at tertiary level, some at the earlier stage. Devin, if you don't mind, just go back to the top of the just a little upward on the spreadsheet. Yeah, and right. So just closing comments on this, guys. So then we can move to the agriculture aspect of the program. Rajendra, closing comments on education.
Yes, I'm sort of tired of this giving out money. The thing is, I always raise this point. We are not India, China strategize poverty alleviation, and poverty keeps people out of the education system. And when we keep giving, we don't have all this oil money like Gaddafi and so on. They own the oil industry. We don't. We get a little piece of it only. And when we give out to the rich, to the poor, the middle class, and the people at the bottom, the same thing. When you give equal to unequal, it's the perpetuation of inequality. We need to have I set up a poverty program at the Ministry of Labor. I was advisor to the minister. It's still operating. We need a professionally led welfare system where people in need can go. So when we're giving the money to everybody, who rich, who poor, who can afford, who can't afford, it doesn't make sense initially to me. So we need to examine the way we share out the money, the limited money that we have. Okay, it's easy to say give everybody everything, you know, but let's
Yeah.
direct it to those who are really in need initially,
Yeah.
and
No.
then we can look to spread it afterward. Let's take that 40% out of the poverty. Let's
Yeah.
ensure their children are in school, because we are perpetuating the poverty, we are perpetuating the needy, and we know that leads also to criminal activities. It's one of the factors.
Yeah.
So we
Very good
need to
points.
direct the money to those who really need.
Who really needs it? Very good points, Rajendra. Amir Mohammed, professor, said that combine all three is his take on this. And Professor, in your closing comments on education, also, I think Rajendra made a very good point there. Grants across the board may not be as effective as uplifting our lower incomes segment of our society. So maybe, a little more focus financially to the lower income as opposed to across the board. Some good points, Professor. What do you have to add?
No, I think the thing I want to say, I want to take people, education is not an expense. It is the infrastructure for the future. He made this point, the children determine what the future are. And so there are three important things when you think about education. Human capacity development. These are the people who will do the work tomorrow. Social mobility. This is how you get out how you really get out in a sustained way from poverty. And then the third thing I think is about education's got to make you innovative and competitive in the world, not just in the small place Guyana, but Guyana's got to be competitive in the world. And I think we have to face up to the fact, the graphs that you showed us, 50% of the workforce today lacks the full secondary education. This education that we have today is unequal across the region, it's unequal across income, as you've just been describing, it's unequal across gender. And the thing that I want to say is that the oil by itself is not going to solve that. We have to collectively solve that. And we have to see every child as deserving of a proper education, as deserving of this. We collectively have to see it. And that's the point I would make. I'm not going to talk down the redistributive aspect of what folks are doing. I think it's important. If you're poor, you want money. But I do think that I'm going to sort of just gently critique that none of the manifestos have really looked at something that is transformative, that says, okay, we believe in every child in every part of Guyana should have a first-class education. We
Yep.
believe every child, every part of Guyana should go to QC. And if they can't go to QC, we'll bring QC to them.
The Saints, Saint Stanislaus,
Well, go to Saints.
Professor. Saints. I'm a
Or go
Saints
to
boy.
Saint or St. Roses, or I mean, yes,
Yeah.
they should
Yeah.
get the highest quality education.
Absolutely.
Every child.
Absolutely.
This
Joe,
approach.
yeah, Joe Guyana's pushed out to deliver some of the most educated, academically qualified people. Some are serving in judgeship in Brooklyn, some running CEOs of major companies, contribution towards COVID vaccine development. Guyanese have made tremendous amount of accomplishment from the earlier days of education. My common entrance teacher, the things he taught me still carries me through life today. Joe, how can we be able to convince the government of the day, be it PPP or APNU or WIN, that they should cross the political aisle and be able to come up with a consensus to have an educational platform that could be transformative, as Professor Blackman and also Rajendra has pointed out. Can we get there, Joe?
Yes, that is very required. Like we said earlier, we need to have a group of scholarly people to start from the discipline of the children to every step of education. Like when we did the primary education development, right? We did everything and to implement. You see, no plan with work. We must plan properly with the proper people in there and we must qualify and quantify, then implement each stages and look for ex post evaluation every 6 months. How are we doing? What is our plan? How did it work? You talked just now about the handouts. I call it handouts. That is creating a welfare mentality, making people dependable, that we want money and we'll vote for the party that will give us money. And they would get a lazy, non-working attitude. And that's a very dangerous thing.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to Canada right now. You see so many people getting housing and this and that. One guy was my tenant and he sold his house, take the money back to India and come and rent from me. So he's now
Yeah.
getting welfare and everything else.
Dependency economy. Thank you, Joe. Thanks very much. And I believe Rajendra made a very good point about the distribution of the grants should really
Yeah,
focus on the underprivileged
that's correct.
sector, yeah, yet those who deserve it. So my fellow Guyanese brothers and sisters, we at Globespan are not trying to bring in big numbers. We are trying to talk about issues and bring in opinions and discussion in a very diverse way. We as Guyanese brothers and sisters, we are looking to achieve certain goals and vision for Globespan 24/7. So we are asking that to help us build a society that is much more informed from all sides. If you notice our media platform, brothers and sisters, you would find it's just really one set of narrative. You don't have a contribution from all sides. So we want to change that. And at the beginning, it may not be the most popular one, but of course, it's going to continue to build. We also want to build a society where we can change from within. I noticed that Rajendra Singh, I think, posted something about holding the unions responsible. You know, not everything is a confrontation. We must look to change from within so that we can be able to affect positive changes on the outside. A society that can reason together. We need to reason. We need to look at the bigger picture. We need to count the cost of our decisions. And a society that can work to keep hope alive. Guyana is a great country. We have not made the greatness out of it for ourselves, and this is what we need to work towards. In saying that, I want to thank you, gentlemen, for your contribution in the educational sector. This is a discussion we need to continue. I value every one of your contribution, your suggestions, and certainly they're very, very much good nuggets so that we could build on for a future program. I want to switch now to the agricultural side, another very, very big, important part of our nation building. Devin, if you don't mind, if you could go to that graph, the agriculture contribution to GDP from 2015 to 2024. So, gentlemen, if we could just look at the graph, it talks about agriculture, forestry, and fishing contribution to GDP from 2015 to 2024. And if you look at it, 2015, we started out at 25.4% contribution to GDP, and it kept sliding to 20%, 22, and now we are down 2024, 7.6% contribution to GDP. Very important point. It is not saying that the amount of money that the agriculture sector contributed to GDP contracted. What it's really saying, the graph is saying to us, is that the contribution to overall GDP has contracted given the fact that oil and gas came on the scene, and they have now taken up a very big part of GDP contribution. But what I want to circle the discussion around is that agriculture becoming such a small part, it still should be at a primary part of our focus, and also the importance of the country given the employment, the history of the country, the landscape of the country. So Rajendra, do you want to start? Maybe make some comments on this?
Mr. Bisasur, you're on mute.
Oil distorts the situation. To my mind, when the oil leaves the offshore and goes to America, it doesn't pass through Guyana. For me, our GDP is 14.5% minus the taxes we pay for Exxon. That the rest of the GDP don't pass through this country, it don't affect this country. So when you talk about the GDP growth and the percentage of GDP, it's a distortion. We need to look at real figures in terms of actual growth or decline of the particular item. So I prefer not to look at percentage of GDP. Secondly, when you look at Guyana's agriculture, other than rice and sugar, we have essentially peasant farming. Most of our agriculture is small farmers, peasant farmers.
It's a TV
And so our efficiency level is pretty low. And so, are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay. So we have peasant farming, and we do not have the large scale. And the large, when you unmute, you need to mute. Joe, I think you need to mute. But we do have what in agriculture, what you notice right now, when the PPP talk of corn and soya and so on, what has happened in Guyana is that while a lot of Guyanese are applying for land and waiting for years for land, we have some foreigners coming into the country. Like, for instance, in the Ibini Kimbia area, I was proposing a state farm, educating people in the state farm and allocating land next to it to small farmers with extension offices and so on. But what is happening right now is the Brazilians and so on, one of them, I think one company got 25,000 hectares and so on. And they're the one planting. So it's like a little niche in some part of Guyana, but it's not affecting the local production. We don't have orchard. Our private sector also, and this is where I want to do the manifesto, what they're talking about, who is going to drive the growth in this country. And if you're going to say the private sector is going to be the driving force for the growth, then we're in serious trouble. Of course, we need them, and they're doing reasonable jobs, but they alone cannot develop this country. And that is why Chadi spoke about the trisectoral economy. And when I was with the AFC, I ensured we had a trisectoral economy put into the manifesto. So the private sector in this country, they're not going into making large food farms or orchards where it would bring down the price of bananas and so on. So your price for bananas and mangoes, you're paying $100 for a mango. Yeah. It's probably just as expensive as apple.
Okay.
So that's the major problem. The state has to intervene, and one of the factors is the development bank. We need that agri-bank.
Yeah.
The development bank is the thing that's going to be lending money at a low percentage rate. You cannot carry out agriculture and manufacturing going to the commercial bank, and you have to borrow at 15 and 17%. You cannot do that. So we need the development bank. It was in the manifesto of the coalition, and that is why I was very upset when they did not implement it. We also knew where to get the money from. So we need that development bank. And the last point I'd like to make with regard to that is that you want fertilizer. They talk of setting up fertilizer factories, but I'll tell you this much. An oil refinery in this country is going to give you cheap fertilizer. It's going to give you bitumen to build the roads. And I'm frankly saying, I have somebody from America, a Guyanese American, a civil engineer, who got financing to the tune of $5 billion to resuscitate Skeleton and build a refinery. You already had a provisional EPA, and he's trying to get a permanent one. And that project is being blocked. If we have a refinery in this country, and I hope any party going in power ensure we put that refinery in place, we're going to get cheap agricultural fertilizer, and we're going to get cheap bitumen and cheap energy. And I do not understand why they're dragging the foot. Honestly, I don't.
Yeah, thank you, Rajendra. And just to read a comment from Jay Barrett, which speaks volume in terms of where we are politically. He says that no harm when PPP in government, PNC wants them to fall. When PNC is in power, PPP wants them to fall. If they can't shake hands, how will they agree on a common vision of education? Seems to be the crux of our problems for the 60 years, Professor. But going back to the agriculture, Rajendra made some very good point. The agri-bank, the interest rate for a loan in Guyana is pretty much the banks are becoming your partner. So your comments, Professor, and Professor, before you start, Rajendra said he did not want to talk about the the percentage contribution to GDP. What I'm trying to bring out there is the importance of agriculture. It should not fall towards that Dutch disease of where it becomes now more a focus for us, because one of the things that Basde Pandey has always talked about in his political career, how important it is for a nation to be able to have a very robust and dependable agriculture sector. So on that note, Professor, take it away.
No, I think you're absolutely, I think you're absolutely correct. But let me see. I think we can all agree. Let's say we can agree on this. We can agree on the chart, what the chart shows, and what we see there is a dramatic contraction of the share of agriculture, forestry, and fishing in Guyana's economy. And we know it, and we can compute. It's from over 25% in 2015 down to under 8% in 2024. And we know why this is happening. The oil revenue is transforming, but I think Rajendra got it right. It's sort of transforming the macro economy. And the question we should be thinking is, are we neglecting the sectors that feed us and employ us and root us? And this is I think some years ago I actually talked about this in something, and I pointed out that oil is the future, yes, but agriculture is the foundation. And maybe to tie this to the conversation that we were having earlier, is that you see, this is precisely the place in which the education aspect needs to step up, not just to train the oil engineers, but also for us to think in a very innovative way about how we do agricultural innovation, how we do climate smart farming, how we do, we saw recently some article which said that, Guyana has this distinction of being one of the countries in the world that pretty much should have enough food to feed everyone that's there. So we should be the breadbasket of the Caribbean as we've long aspired. But we're not going to do that if we're not focused on an education system that drives us there, on a set of policies that drive us there, that extend beyond 5-year cycles when we have elections. And I think that this is I hope we can all agree that that's what the graph says, and we can agree on the numbers and the percentages, and maybe that becomes a basis for us to think about what we do going forward. But it's clear.
One of the important question is just
Rajendra, we'll come back to you. Rajendra, we'll come back to you. I just want to keep the sequence going. Hey, Joe, agriculture, your expertise, you're a former advisor to President Dr. Jagan. What's your comments on this, Joe? Joe, you're mute.
Mr. Fasad, you're on mute.
Yep.
Now, first of all, any government, and this is where it is, we talk about education. Education, whether you go formal or acquire knowledge through experience. And you got to provide goods and services through proper planning, quantifying, qualifying, and implementation. The first thing I have advised the last government and this one in writing 100-year planning, right? Like you make industries on both sides of the Demerara River, no housing along there, because Demerara River is our import-export, building a road in your planning across from quarantine there to the bridge right across to Supanam, a road to Brazil, one branch to Georgetown, one to Mahaica, and you open those lands for agriculture, because that's our basic fall when we come there and look at what crops. You got to do photogrammetry to find out the sloping of the land, how you're going to have drainage, where you're going to move your stuff out, how government going to help you out, all weather road or whatever. It's planning. And then we implement. Now you got to, in the planning, in a 100-year plan, you do what you start by 5 years, then 10-year, according to your budget. And now you can start, like, for example, what you got to study the market, what's the outside market is, like Source-up, Cygen, and all these things that they said are good for cancer. There are big demands for them and high price. I prepared the report for the commission on sugar, a short-term action, medium-term, and long-term. And in that outcome, some sugar estates had to be closed. Look, you're pumping money into it, right? And it's continue doing, because I also told them that sugar is being taken over by beet and more healthy sweeteners. Now you got to look at all these, how your products, your production, etc. And when we talk about agriculture today, we got to talk about how can we provide more organic foods than put foods with chemicals killing the world, right? My thesis was development. My thesis was the CPF for development. And agriculture was one of the things to grow food, like they were growing chicken to feed the world. And you got to put chemicals to grow the chicken in order that people can eat. But if you had proper planning, like you take the electricity, you would need electrical energy to do certain things for you. When I was here with the government, then I spoke to Dr. Jagan, and he sent a meeting with me and Mr. Prime Minister Sam Hines, etc., and Nokta and somebody else. When we go to the meeting was canceled, and I told them ahead of time, we need 1.5 times the energy then. And then you come to another thing. When you're doing all this planning, where's your 4 M's? You can't do nothing without it. Man, money, machine, and material. This government, I advise the president, vice president, and some of the other in writing on the budget. Don't create an overhead in budget. Don't try to do too much. You are going to short of manpower and all these 4 M's.
Yeah.
The very first thing they took the workers out of rice and sugar. Everybody going for construction for more money. And when people go and focus in the city, rent went up, food went up, and it caused supply and demand. And then what happened? Inflation. That's the cost of living problem right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
When you invest too much and you don't have the money there, that's what happened to Trinidad. I got a great experience in Trinidad when we designed that steel plant. And you know what the people were saying? When they see so many activities, my God, what are they talking about the PNM government? You know, that look how many things happening. Then what happened? Suddenly everything slowed down right down. They owed money in debt the nation.
Yeah.
And the exchange rate gone to $4 for Canadian and $6 for US.
Yeah.
So if you don't plan properly
Yeah.
ahead of time and take bits and pieces from that plan.
Yeah. Yeah. So Joe, you spoke very heavily on having a master plan 100 years, and then you start to go in by segments of 5, 10, 15. You spoke about diversification. You spoke about the overall energy supply towards agriculture, and of course, having other sector of the economy drawing on your agricultural employees or workers. So some good points, and I hope we could expand on these things and additional programs on Globespan regarding agriculture. But again, I want to tell my brothers and sisters that we need to count the cost when we place our race and political parties over our country. If you've looked deeper into Guyana, you will find that the assets we have as Guyanese are so much that every Guyanese can be a very successful and rich person living in Guyana and also out of Guyana. So we will need to craft a new way forward. We definitely need to relook at what went wrong in the past 60 years and look to a new way forward. A place to start is to question from within. We need to question from within ourselves, make changes so that we can see and we can desire what the next generation should be looking for and a better growth for our country. If you're happy with status quo, as the US agency such would say, then I think definitely you need to look from within to make some changes. Devin, you want to bring up that graph so we could just kind of close off on the agriculture side? Um, it, Gentlemen, this is a graph and it's a side-by-side comparison of the PPP, APNU, and WIN. There's the vision side of it, food producing capital of the Caribbean, rescue and revitalize agriculture was APNU, AgriVision 2030, Caribbean Agriculture Hub, that was WIND. They talked about land and infrastructure. They talked about farmer support. They talked about crop development, the sugar industry, and research and technology. Across the board, we have put pretty much the three main front-running political parties right now. And Devin, could you drop down a little? Maybe we could just see the summary from it. And it says that overall takeaway, PPP focus on traditional crop revival and diversification. State support the farmers and AI-driven modernization. And then on WIN side, WIN introduces a brand Agri-Vision 2030 plan with a strong emphasis on cooperative, grants, land distribution, coconut and grain diversification, vertical farming, and digital monitoring. And then if we switch to APNU, APNU emphasis is on food security, land reform, and state-led investment. And I think that kind of went to what Ginger was talking about the agri-bank. And with major focus on infrastructure, research, and technology adoption, drones, precision agri. So those are the key takeaway. Of course, there's some deviation from it by each political party. But the three main one, they have their plans. Rajendra, do you want to shed some light on any part of the plans based on
Yeah,
any?
I like this idea that was put forward by women to emphasize coconut. And one of the reason why I like that is because remember one time we were told coconut oil was bad. Now we know it's the best oil. And so we need to produce a lot of coconut oil, bring the price down so our people can enjoy the benefit of coconut oil and better health. Well, I love that idea. And I like the idea. When I was a advisor to the Minister of Labor, ILO and us, we produced a modern co-op act, a bill, a law, and it's sitting on the shelf in the Ministry of Labor right now. Maybe they don't know about it. I'm reminding them it's sitting there. So we need to pass that law to modernize the co-op laws. And it is going to help because the PPP talk of mega farms, obviously that's going to increase the wealth gap. And so we need the cooperatives as a means of taking people out of poverty. And in terms of what is happening to the people at the bottom is the producers are not getting much of the money from their produce and due to the hard work. The middleman is getting the money. So we need to educate our people within the various areas to form maybe selling co-op so that they can get together and sell their product so that they can maximize the take from agriculture. And so that might create an incentive for people to be in agriculture. The other point is long ago we had school agricultural plots in school. So we had that and I had to go into the plot and look after that. The school I was going to in Kanji also had a apiary, I think what they call it. We had bees. So all of these things were being done in some of the schools. We need to put it back into the school. And we don't need an agricultural school just in Monripo. Every region should have an agricultural school. Because if agriculture is the basis for sustainable development, is the only basis for sustainable development. So we need to have those agricultural schools in various places. Joe made an excellent observation in terms of the migration of people from agriculture into other areas. So we have to find some means of making agriculture profitable for those. The big question is, if the private sector is not going to expend their money in that way, then I think the state, and some people believe the state cannot be profitable. They've been taught that they're wrong, because places like Denmark, Sweden, Norway, they have about 50% state ownership, and they have the best welfare, best system for the people, and the Gini coefficient, which is the measure of inequality, is 28 compared to like USC and so on, of 48. So we need the state to be involved, because the private sector in third world country especially cannot be the only engine of growth. So any person with a trisectoral economy, Chadi was right, the state, the private sector, and the cooperative.
Yeah.
And especially in agriculture, we need a cooperative.
Yeah, and you know, Rajendra, I'll put a smile on your face, because President Donald J. Trump just took in 10% of Intel, 15% profit from NVIDIA, and also, I believe, the golden share from Nippon Steel. So, you know, those has been his latest moves to many critics, and some are applauding it, so coming in from both
No,
sides.
let me make this point to you. I studied the WTO, okay? And what the rich countries did was impose upon us that we must not put subsidies. And they are increasing the subsidies but the problem is in agriculture. That is why when they sold rice to Jamaica, we couldn't compete. And that's where they're subsidizing heavily agriculture, and we are being told by the we should not subsidize agriculture.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
We
that's
have
a,
to
you know,
subsidize it
discussion
first.
for another day. Let's move to Professor. Professor, we're coming closing time as well. So some comments there on dovetailing from what Virginia mentioned.
No, I think it's certainly the case that that agriculture is, I think, a national security kind of sector. So it's not simply a sector that can be left up to the private, to the, you know, quote, private sector. And I think or all of the parties get it in this sense. I mean, they all, the manifestos all highlight, you know, food security and modernization and you know, agro processing and some the like. I think if you look for places of difference between them, in a sense, the PPP is doing what incumbents always do. They're leaning on the infrastructure and the sectoral sort of leadership. I think if you look at AFC and ABNU, they both kind of frame the agriculture as part of some broader national transformation. And I think you're absolutely right. If we read what we see WIN, but I also, in the case of FGM, I also looked at both WIN and FGM sort of offer something that's a little more innovative, a little more grassroots, like you. So I think though, and it's interesting that there's insufficient discussion in all of the manifestos of climate, some kind of climate smart agriculture. One would have expected that, and you know, the integration of technology into these manifestos, into the agricultural sector, and to the point that Joe has been mentioning frequently, there's very little in terms of some metric for evaluating the impact of what they're going to be doing. And so I think even as we see the importance, we're again left with this sense that across the spectrum, there's not enough attention being paid to the details, so that we don't know what people are measuring. It's just like, I'm going to promise you something today and hope it resonates with you, but I really don't have a clearly thought out plan about what it is that I'm going to be actually doing in this context.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Joe, before I pass over for your comments, Virginia, we're coming back to you for a second. But Joe, I just want to go back to Jay Barrett comment when PPP is in government, PNC wants them to fall, and vice versa, PNC, PPP wants them to fall. Joe, there must be good people in all the political parties. How can we get to a consensus, Joe, where if it is that we criticize a political party doesn't necessarily mean you want to bring them down? I mean, how can we get to a point of critique, a point of compliments? Because at the ending of the day, where we are today as a nation, and if we were to look at the status quo, the OFAC has been issuing sanctions. State Department, their declaration on Guyana talks about massive corruptions, police, etc. United Nations talks about, some of the human rights. The Carter Center, which report just came out lately. The international agencies, them, Joe, are not the reports are not very much telling what could be a better story for all of us Guyanese. Joe, how do we get to appeal to the good people that's in each one these political parties, be it PPP, APNU, WIN, etc., to come up with a consensus?
Basically, all the parties have good manifestos. They're bringing all the gold and diamond now to the people. But when you come to the time of doing it, it's a different thing. Third world mentality politicians are very different. And you put a garland on their neck, they think they're gods. And power in the hands of the irresponsible is a highly volatile commodity. And you take the PPP and PNC, from 60 years now independence to now they failed. The people suffered. And now they owe $8 billion. That is for the population. 11 million US dollars is hanging on everyone's neck. Then they didn't manage the 4 M's properly, like Trinidad. They stopped planting rice and sugar because everybody went to construction. And although this government was well advised not to create overheated budget, they did. So the whole damn thing is in a mess right now. And what they did, they're building half a street. You look at the street. Let me say this. This is important. You look at the street they're building, 2 cars coming, they quarrel. Secondly, the Quarantine Road from Crabble Creek to Charity. You got to be planning everything properly, and this is the third world mentality. There will be crime here. They closed Trinidad down, and it's the same thing happened. They're widening the road, which is a service road where people live and do all their services, schools, everything, routine things. And widening those roads to 4 lanes, the cost is much higher than building another road somewhere at the back. Then the other thing is that the noise level above 90 decibels is annoyance level. And when it's annoyance, it's going to create criminals and mad people down the road. So this government have failed completely in my mind. And I hope there be a change in the future. And I am not a member of any party.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for that contribution. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we come into our closing comments now by each one of our contributors tonight. Globespan will be on tomorrow night again with Professor Paul Tennessee, Timothy Jonas, and Mr. Alexander will be on tomorrow night. Looking forward to have a robust contribution from each one of them regarding the election process into election 2025. I would like to say, Devon, we need to find a way to compliment or send Mr. Collins Singh a gift. There's not any Globespan program I've been on, and I have not seen Collins Singh watching from Canada. So, Mr. Collins Singh, thank you so much. You've been on every Globespan program. Virginia, closing comments. Let's wrap it up on the. If you want to add both educational and agriculture, that's fine.
In closing, I would just like to say that it doesn't make too much sense presenting manifestos a couple of weeks before an election. And who's going to read those manifestos and who's going to understand the manifestos? To my mind, it's just a waste of money. They should print basic ideas, like with the break it down, But a manifesto should have some measurability, It must be more specific, something measurable, something realistic, and there must be some time frames. It's not like throwing a bunch of promises. I think we have a list of promises as opposed to a real manifestos. The other point is, I am appealing to our people that regardless of who is in power, we know our constitution gives excessive powers to the ruling party and the president. I'm appealing to our people. When the sugar workers and bauxite workers went on strike together, Hoyt said 0%. They got 40%. Unity of the working people. If the working people were to unite according to their interests instead of race, we could hold any government accountable. All we have to do is stay home when we are upset with things and let them send a message to them. But we are fighting each other just because somebody belongs to another party. We are going out there and abusing them, cussing them about their mother and everything else. Where are we going? This is an appeal. Stop it. A man has a right to belong to a party of his choice. We fought for democracy in this country. I myself suffered like hell. A lot of people died for the democracy that we have. The PPP was behind the struggle for this democracy. And I find some of the PPPIs are the worst culprit in terms of cussing you down because you simply happen not to be PPP. And so when David Hines talk about this expression of people who cross the floor, they're forgetting that people are crossing the floor to them. And when people like me cross the floor to the other side and they insult me, they have to stop it. It's not getting us anywhere. This is my final appeal.
Thank
We
you.
can hold the government accountable if we unite in our economic interests.
Thank you.
That is my message to the people of this country.
Thank you, Ginger Biseslau. And you did bring some good, valid, important contribution to the discourse tonight. Professor Dr. Blackman?
Well, I think, again, I want to thank you and the folks at Globespan and to thank Joe and Rajendra for really a nice conversation. And the thing is, I confess I am not in Guyana. And so, the person who is there feels it much more than I can in New York City. But I always want to say to us, boy, let's remember, you mentioned earlier today, Nohar, all of the Guyanese who have done, think of this COVID, which was, one of the central challenges of humanity of the last decade, but from perhaps more than the last decade. And there was a Guyanese at the heart of helping to bring the COVID vaccine to fruition. So I think we have to remember that we're decent people, not just in our gold and oil and bauxite and all, but in hearts and minds. And look, we've been talking about, and everyone said, look, we have these challenges that we face, and we've been saying this on this program many, many times, but I'll say it again. We have these challenges that we're facing: education, agriculture, the question of governance that you guys have just been, these are real, right? But I think what I somehow always want to say is, like, we have to, our capacity to manage these challenges are also there. They're also real. And we have to try to begin to think about how we get beyond these tribal political lines and get some consensus, even if it's just to get some consensus on some of these issues that matter. Every child should have a world-class education. Every family should share in the prosperity of Guyana. And so it's that's as clear as day to me, and they can. And it just depends on whether or not we're willing to, reach beyond the boxes that we find ourselves sitting in, if even just to come to a consensus on some issue in education or some issue around agriculture and food security. So, it's the choice is ours. If we build it, we can build it together.
Yeah. count the cost of our choices. Well said, though, Professor Blackman. I think we'll get there. I think there's a minority few that are basically sounding off and drowning out the quiet ones, because the quiet ones are not speaking up. But I believe we'll get there. We have hope. Joe, there's a man named Mr. Never Sital. He's been calling for you to speak. So in your closing closing comments, Joe, Never Sital is calling you out. So please go ahead, Joe. Let's close it up.
Okay. If you recall, the PPP had a 7-module thing for monitoring the performance of government. They call it IFMAS. And the 6th and 7th, which deals with transparency and accountability, was never implemented by the PPP. And the coalition, in their campaigning, they said they're going to implement it, was never done. So I'm asking any government, look for corruption, look for transfer of technology. We can't do nothing without the 4 M's and properly trained people. You'll need we'll go through a further problem. You would not have the skill to do what you have to do, and you would have to import them at high prices. In trade, that those days, people.
Joe?
Per month, if you want to have that level of people to come and work here. And government should try their best to stop all gossips. If you start to act perfectly, training people, educate them, and import their respective skills. For example, what Trinidad did, they had consulting engineers. Let's say we were designing the steel plant, but we had to go in joint venture with a local engineering company so that technology transfer. So all these are important things that we got to go and monitor people, ensure that they are happy, and don't do too much and create cost of living, high cost of living. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Joe, and to all of my brothers and sisters, our fellow Guyanese. Our Globespan program is not a program that is colorful in the sense that we do not have all of those fancy languages that you guys have been listening to. What we try to do on Globespan is to have a diverse conversation. We agree to disagree. We bring in point of views from all sides. And I believe this is part of our growing process that could help change and shape the trajectory of Guyana so it could be a better place for the people. At the ending of the day, it's all about the people and how best their lives could be improved. I want to thank each one of you, each one of these gentlemen, for their contribution. And certainly I would like to have them back on Globespan for a more extensive conversation. But given this election 2025, tomorrow night will be Professor Paul Tennessee. It would be Mr. Alexander, Timothy Jonas, continuing the conversation on election 2025. And we're also looking forward to having guests on for Thursday night, Friday night, going all the way into 1st and 2nd of September. So ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, thank you very much. Everyone, have a good night.
Gentle folks, thank you very much. Have
Good
a
night, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.